With me today is Dr. Kirstin Ferguson, who is one of Australia's most prominent leadership experts. An award-winning author, columnist and company director, Kirstin is also making global impact with UK-based Thinkers 50, naming her one of the world's top 30 thinkers to watch. And she was shortlisted for the Distinguished Award in Leadership in 2021. Kirstin's career includes 3 decades of leadership experience, including a previous appointment by the Australian Prime Minister as acting chair and deputy chair of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And she spent nearly 10 years as an officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. Kirstin's second book, Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership, has been described as #1 New York Times best-selling author Adam Grant as a timely, actionable book on the virtues that every leader needs to learn. And this is what we're going to be chatting about today. So welcome to Leading You, Kirstin.
Thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. And we're so aligned with our passions and beliefs and theories about leadership. And since I've discovered you and your brilliance, I was so keen to chat to you and get your message out to my audience because it's just simply bloody brilliant. So,
well, thank you. We can just wrap up now. I think that says it all. Let's go.
Everyone, buy the book. We're done.
I like your style.
Yeah. All right. So now we share a belief that leadership starts with you. And I believe that you can't be a leader of others unless you are a leader of self. So I would love to know how you anchor yourself to how you want to be as a leader each day.
Yeah, I think needs to be this recognition, as you said, that leadership starts with ourselves. I have a slightly different bent to you in that I think everyone is leading, whether they know it or not. They just could be really poor leaders. Yeah. And so that means really considering the impact you're having every single day in every conversation, in every discussion that's happening at work or at home about the way you're presenting yourself, because you are a leader in the words that you use, the choices you make, the behaviors you role model. And I think as soon as you realize that, then you start to think about, oh, okay, well, how do I do that a bit better, because things aren't really going to plan around me. And this is a matter of looking inside and really owning and taking responsibility for your own leadership.
Yeah, I love that. And you're so right. You're leading regardless of whether you know it or not. So you can be good or really bad.
I think so. And there's terrible leaders out there. There's still leaders. And so this is why it's a matter of really important for all of us to understand we are leading. And even it doesn't matter what it says on your position title or where you are in an org chart or anything like that. You are still leading. You're still impacting those around you.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, when did you first realize your passion for leadership? And was there a defining moment that sort of propelled you on your trajectory now to global impact?
Well, I think I've been thinking and researching and being a leader probably my whole adult life. So I joined the military when I was only 17 and went off to the Australian Defence Force Academy and was put in a position of leadership there really early. I was a 20-year-old with a disproportionate amount of power, and you soon learn a lot about leadership. I then while I was only 21, did an honours degree, and my thesis was in leadership. So I look back now as an almost 50-year-old, and really it's been my whole life thinking and writing about leadership and leading and doing a good job and doing a terrible job, being a leader in every different circumstance, whether the military or professional services, sitting on boards where you influence others. So there's lots of different types of leadership that I've experienced. I don't think there is one moment that has set me off on, as you call it, a trajectory. It doesn't feel like that for me. It just feels like, the next phase, and I'm always learning. So I still feel like a beginner, and I think for every leader, that's probably a pretty healthy place to be.
Yeah. I think that it's a really healthy mindset, because I think some leaders can get into trouble when they think they have to know it all, or they think they do know it all.
Yeah, I write in my book about this smartest person in the room syndrome, and it's just our biggest blocker as leaders, to being able to give space to others. And
Mm,
I think it comes from centuries of being taught that leaders needed to be all knowing, have all the answers. You know, the great men of history knew
mm,
everything and you didn't question them. And, you know, that is just not fit for purpose in the modern world, and they're not the modern leaders that we're looking for. And so even though the stereotype of the, you know, smartest person in the room is that they don't really know what they're talking about, often they may actually in fact be the smartest person in the room. However, a modern leader knows they don't need to prove that. And in fact, being smart is all about asking really good open-ended questions so others come to that solution, even if you're sitting there going, I know exactly how this is going to play out, I've been in this
yeah.
movie. So I think feeling the need to have all the answers all the time is probably one of the greatest challenges that I see in my work leaders dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. So fast forward to now, and you've written Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership. That has been endorsed by the one and only Adam Grant. Like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And
It
I've
is a
had the
thrill.
privilege of having a sneak peek at the introduction, and I was absolutely captivated by it and really can't wait to read it. So I'm keen to understand, what was it that inspired you to write the book and know that it just had to be out there in the world?
Well, there was a moment actually where I watched a TED talk of Simon Sinek's from, I think it's about 2013, and he just briefly mentioned the story of a Captain Swenson in Afghanistan, but he was using it in a different context. But it intrigued me enough that I went and Googled it and tried to find out more about this story. And
Mm,
it is the most extraordinary story, and I
mm,
ended up doing a deep dive into the citation that Captain Swenson won for this particular moment in the Afghanistan war. And if anyone wants to Google Captain Swenson on YouTube, you'll find headcam footage from the battle that he was involved in at the Battle of Ganjal. And it was just one of those, you know, terrible battles and lots of lives lost. And Captain Swenson was only 31 and unexpectedly found himself commanding this battle that was happening, and because the most senior person there had been injured. But there's a moment captured on headcam footage, which I'm sure he didn't even realize there was a headcam, you know, operating in all of this.
mm,
But he puts a sergeant into the helicopter, and as he puts him in, he gently gives him a kiss on the cheek. And it's this incredibly tender moment, which for me showed not only his bravery and his command and control and his ability to lead with his head in that moment, but very much also leading with his heart and showing humility and empathy, courage, but really importantly, self awareness of the impact that he was going to have in that moment. And for me, leadership is just a series of moments. We have those moments in all our lives. We're not going to most likely experience something like Captain Swenson did, but it did start me on a path of thinking about what it means to lead with our head and our heart. And that metaphor we've used throughout Western history for millennia, even back to, you know, people like Aristotle. It's easy for us to grasp what it means. And so I really wanted to align that to what is it leading with the head and the
yeah.
heart, you know, and then that's when I started doing the research and creating, you know, measures and tools to actually be able to look at what that means.
Yes, that must have taken you an enormous amount of time. Like, there's so much behind the book as well. And I think you really captivate people in that introduction, because I think that story is such a great example. You know, Captain Swenson, he's injured. And you mentioned he can't even remember that moment that he actually did that. It was just instinct
It
for
was,
him.
yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, I think for many of us, we can relate in different circumstances where we're compassionate in moments of really challenging, difficult times. But when it's harder is when it's just day to day and you're, you know, dealing with project management, or you're working
Mm,
in retail or hospitality. What I try and do in the book is relate, you know, this to our everyday experiences, whether you're a parent or whether you're running a company. And I interview dozens of Australian leaders, but they're really diverse. So yes, I talk to big titans of industry like the CEO of BHP. You don't get much bigger companies to lead than that. But I
Mm,
also talked to Sally McManus, who leads the union movement, which is a very different collective type of leadership. I talked to academics, I talked to trans activists. Like, it's just
mm,
a real spread of leaders. And many of them started by saying to me, I don't know why you're interviewing me. I'm not a leader at all. And I
yeah.
think that's a really common refrain, because we've
Mm.
been told leaders are only those with the fancy titles, or the corner office, or, the person that we hold at the top of the org chart.
Mm. Yeah, I really love how you're changing, I suppose, that link to leadership in that someone has to have that title to then create influence. But as you mentioned, I've only had the privilege of reading the intro
It's coming. It's coming,
at
I
this
promise.
stage, but parents, I mean, they play the biggest role model with their children. It's
Absolutely.
yeah,
And people might be surprised to know that I've written a leadership book that corporates, love, because it's certainly something that will speak to them. But I actually wrote it with a single mum in mind, sitting at her kitchen bench, starting up a business selling earrings or something online on
yeah, right.
Facebook, because she is leading. She is leading her family. She's
Mm,
leading in the decisions she's making. She is just as much a leader as the CEO of some of our largest companies. And
yes.
so, it's really a book for everyone. And I really hope people start to then see, well, okay, if I am a leader, whether I like it or not, I am leading. How can I make the most of every opportunity?
Yes, I love it. Now, you mentioned before that leadership is simply a series of moments, and every moment gives you the opportunity to leave a legacy, a positive legacy for those you lead. And you've shared, an example of that story. And I just love this. It's just it's simple, but it's incredibly powerful. So, can you elaborate just a little bit more on that for us? Yeah.
Well, it's this idea that every interaction we're having, whether it's talking to you now, or it might be when you buy your milk from the supermarket this afternoon, we do leave a legacy in our wake. And, I can choose to be rude to the person who puts my milk through a little bit late, or a bit slowly, and, leave her or him feeling a bit less than, or I
Mm,
can choose to do something different. Now, that's the most simple way to sort of think about why it is a series of moments. But
mm,
together, it's much more this idea of the legacy we leave, those who are around us all the time. And that's our families, our colleagues, the people in our community. And, I should probably sort of just talk a little bit about what is the art of modern leadership, because to me, it's not a matter of throwing out anything you're already doing. And all the leadership theories we've all been told all have a place. But I think the art of modern leadership is knowing what attributes of the head and the heart are needed, and when they're most appropriate. And so through the research I did, I identified there's 4 attributes of leading with the head and 4 of the heart, and because they're in balance, you need all of them. And the 4 from leading with the head, and I should say, if people go to headheartleader.com, you can measure this for yourself. So it's a 5-minute scale that I developed with QUT, and you'll get a report, and it'll tell you if you're more of a head-based or a heart-based leader. But the 4 attributes of leading with the head are curiosity, wisdom, perspective, which is a bit like reading the room, but that's the turbo boost for modern leaders, and capability, and that's around growth mindset and building growth mindset in others. And then the 4 capabilities of leading with the heart are humility, self-awareness, courage to speak up even in the face of challenge not to, or pressure not to, and also empathy. And so those 8 together, if you can draw on them at any point in time in different amounts, the art is knowing what you need when. And that's how you leave these positive moments as a legacy.
yes, I love that. So it's about being really flexible with your emotion, your behaviors. And I love that perspective, like the turbocharge. We all love a turbocharge.
Well, I think what I've found as a leader myself is that, I love all the work that you can read on vulnerability or,
Yep.
specific things,
Mm,
but I need more than that. And if I'm
mm,
sitting in a boardroom in an audit committee meeting, I'm not quite sure how I apply vulnerability. Now, I'm being a bit facetious because I do have some ideas on how I would do that, but it's harder. So for
yeah.
me, in those moments, using your head is just as important. I mean, I can't throw that out. And so I really wanted to find a way to show that you need it all. You still need to be really capable at your job and able
Yes.
to read those financial reports and ask really pointed and intelligent questions, but you can do so in a way that exercises a bit of humility, that you don't
Yep.
have all the answers, a bit of self awareness about how that question is going to be received, and maybe a
Yes.
bit of courage if there's something there that's worrying you. So it's always a bit of both, and that is the art of modern leadership.
I love it. So, out of those 8 attributes, what do you think is the most lacking with current leaders today? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? Is it more of the heart? More of I don't.
Well,
I wouldn't
in,
think it's more of the head. That just thinking quickly.
Interestingly, so wisdom is about, so if you put wisdom and humility together, it's about being able to accept you don't have all the answers. And it ties into what we were talking about before. And that is
Mm.
the area that most people are lacking in. And, some of us probably also suffer from what's called the Solomon paradox. And, everyone listening would have heard of King Solomon, and everyone traveled miles to hear him give wise, advice on how they should lead their life. But his private life was a total mess. He had 700 wives,
Yeah.
300 concubines, and he loved luxury and grandeur. And so the Solomon paradox is this idea that we're much better at giving advice than actually taking it ourselves. And I think for many leaders that applies, in that theoretically they know they shouldn't be taking up all the space in a room and speaking and making, giving every answer all the time. I'm sure everyone listening thinks, oh, I don't do that. But the bottom line is we do. And self awareness is a real challenge. While
Mm.
something like 90% of us think we're self aware, only 10 to 15% of the people we lead think we are or actually are. So there's a big gap there. And so I think wisdom is somewhere we could all be doing a bit better at.
Yeah, interesting. Because it's as you say, it's self-awareness, I find, is something um in terms of what I'm seeing out there in the workplace. A lot of leaders will say that their people are really important, that well-being in the workplace is something that's a top priority. But the actions, the behaviors are not demonstrated to support what the words are saying. So there's a real disconnect and therefore an incongruence between those two things, which breeds distrust. And ladies just really aren't conscious of what they're role modeling because they say one thing and do another. And it's really hard for people to just get like, what am I meant to be doing here?
Yeah, and that's why feedback's so important. So
Mm,
feedback is the critical tool, I think, for a modern leader, and that's being able to give it really well and receive it and build a feedback culture. Because if you are a leader that's got, saying one thing and doing another, um, the sad thing is you're probably unlikely to be open to feedback. But if you happen to be a leader that's also
yeah.
open to feedback, the people you're working with are going to be quick to tell you, hey, you've just told everyone, health and safety is a classic. You've just told everyone safety is our number one priority, and yet you've just gone and breached the safety rules in some way. So,
Yeah.
that's something that you need feedback for, and people who are holding you to account, and not in a way that's aggressive or point scoring. And again, this is where you need that empathy and self awareness about how you come across, even if you're talking up, in a
Yeah.
very formal sense. That, you're probably going to have a less healthy feedback conversation if you do it in a way that's really judgmental. But
Mm,
having those open questions is just the number one skill that will help you through those feedback conversations.
mm, yeah. I love that. Thank you. Now, you've interviewed incredible leaders and been around incredible leaders. And I saw you interviewing Jim Collins, like he was just your best friend. It was just so like
He's fabulous.
the rapport was just amazing. And I'm curious, who has been the leader who's had the most impact on you and why?
I find this question really, really difficult because I think of role models for me like a buffet. I've
Yeah.
got, I have a buffet of people who have had an impact because, of course, Jim was amazing. I've interviewed Gloria Steinem, and she's brilliant. I can't compare the two. Adam Grant, we spoke about earlier, he's
Mm,
incredible. I've worked closely with Ida Buttrose. There's so many different leaders that I know and work with, and some who people will have never heard of, yet I still, seek their counsel and advice on how to handle
mm.
different things. So my recommendation always is to people, have as many of these leaders as you can, that you can call on for advice, because they're not all going to be brilliant at everything, and it's great to be able to pick and choose what you need when you need.
I think that's really great advice, but I love the buffet because it's like, what do I feel like today? It's like, what do I
Exactly.
need today? And I totally get that. And as you say, that I'm referring to your book now, is that you've learnt from a whole range of leaders sort of how you would like to be, like adopting traits from leaders, but also how you don't want to be,
Yeah,
in
exactly.
equal importance.
It is. And so, yeah, you'll see in the book, there's obviously a lot of interviews and stories because it's designed to be a really easy read. No
Yeah.
one wants a very big, boring
Mm,
academic book. But that said, it is all based on research. So there's
yeah.
nothing there that's made up. So I also rely on a lot of theories that academics have come up with in the past, but apply them to sort of the real world situations. And
Mm.
um, yeah, I'm really excited to see what people think. It's very practical. Like there's lots of things to take away and to do from it. And
Oh.
I'm really excited to see it out in the world and to develop the modern leaders we need.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. And I love that term, modern leaders, because that can then sort of transgress through and just keeping in mind that leadership, as leaders, and we're all leaders, we have to evolve. We have to evolve to who and what and what we're leading, what's happening in the world. And
That's right. And, every situation will be different. But I do believe the leader you are at your core should be the same at home as it is at work. So this idea of integrating
mm,
leadership is really important from my perspective, because you are leading at home, and the empathy that you have for your kids, or that humility you might have around, the people who know you best, that skill is going to be incredibly valuable in the workplace as well. So don't be shy about bringing it in.
no, that's right. And I always think sometimes the true character as a leader is what they do when no one's watching.
Yeah.
When people who know them are not around them. So I think that's a true test. Now, how can people get their hands on Head and the Heart?
Well, it's going to be out 31st of January. It's already available for order now, so just jump online or go into your nearest bookshop. As I said, visit headheartleader.com. That's
Yep.
where you can also get links through to all of the online retailers, but you can take the Head and Heart Leader scale. It'll take about 5 minutes. You'll get a report just for you, and it'll tell you if you're more of a head or a heart-based leader. And it'll also tell you your strengths around those 8 attributes, descending order. You'll see what your number one attribute
Descending
is.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Also, and I'll share all the links where people can get hold of all your information. So, Kirsten, it's been amazing to chat to you, and I'd love to chat to you for longer. But do you have any final words for our listeners today?
No, just to remember, you are a leader, so be the best one you can be. And that means not being a dinosaur, being a modern leader, because everyone's needing that around them. So thank you.
Absolutely. Kirsten, thank you for your time and your wisdom and for doing the work that you're doing and making such an impact globally. And I really thank you for your time on the Leading You podcast.
Thank you.